Hello, this video covers Module 2, Part 3B, and includes a discussion of the summary data action. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. So the Module 2, Part 3A included a discussion of how to obtain a top 10 list. In this module, we are considering other summaries. For example, if we wanted to compute the sum, mean, median, etc. on a particular field in our data table. That is what will be covered in this module here. We are going to use the small area health insurance estimates data that we used previously, except I'm going to only include a subset of the records that we looked at earlier. That subset includes just the county level information, so all state level information has been removed. I'm only going to be looking at age category 4, which are people under the age of 19. Also, I'm going to be looking at income category 3, which is incomes for the poorest income category. So I'm going to be looking at the percent uninsured for people under the age of 19 who are in the poorest income category. That's the summaries that I'm going to be creating with this data. Here is the data, or a link to the folder. We're going to be using this data set here, and then the task will have you use the home healthcare data set. Here's a list of the fields. This was covered earlier, so I'll skip over that here. The goal here is to, again, obtain the overall percent of uninsured people who are under the age of 19 and are in the lowest income category. Here's the summaries that I am going to be calculating here. I'm going to need to obtain the total number of people in that demographic. I'm going to need to obtain the total number of people that are uninsured in that graphic. That number is about 1.37 million. Total number of people in that demographic is about 20 million. And then the goal is to simply compute a percentage to determine what the uninsured rate is for the people in this demographic. The answer that we're looking for here throughout is about 6.8%. So what are the required data processing steps? The data processing steps involve obtaining a sum for the total number of people, obtaining a sum for the total number of people that are uninsured, and then computing the ratio in order to obtain that 6.82%. At a novice level, we can do this in a spreadsheet, and we could use formulas to compute that desired summary measure. For example, in a spreadsheet, I can use equal sum to obtain the sum of a field, or equal average to obtain an average of a field. Here we're going to want the sum to be used because that's the desired summary measure that I need for this data. There are two videos here, one for using formulas in Google Sheets and another using formulas in Excel. The two approaches are very similar, so if you were to do it in Google Sheets or Excel, there's just slight variations in how you refer to the data table or the fields in Excel versus Google Sheets. When you are using the formulas, it is advised that you use the named ranges or named tables in the formulas instead of highlighting cells. The use of highlighting cells in formulas is very prone to errors, and I discourage its use. It is much better to name the data range and then use that named data range in your formula. The formula approach when obtaining summaries does not easily adapt to other situations. For example, if I wanted to compute this overall percentage by each state, that would be very problematic when you're using the formulas. However, if you were to use pivot tables, that approach is going to be much easier. So let's talk about pivot tables. A pivot table is a powerful tool for creating summaries in a spreadsheet. Google Sheets and Excel both have a pivot table feature. As a practicing data scientist, I use a pivot table a lot in my work. I rarely use formulas. So I understand that I'm comfortable in working with data, and I understand how to use pivot tables, but I would encourage you to become comfortable with pivot tables and stop using formulas to create summaries in spreadsheets. The pivot table feature has been purposely designed to allow for additional actions such as group by or pivot. I can apply a filter on a pivot table. We will talk more about these in the next module. I guess the point that I'm trying to drive home is that pivot tables are a much better way of obtaining summaries than through the use of formulas. They're a lot less error prone. They have features that allow us to more easily obtain summaries in more complex situations. The pivot table approach is done here in Google Sheets and also in Excel. I'll let you pause and watch whatever version you would like, either Google Sheets or Excel. Next, we have doing the summaries using a query function. So the query function is general enough or adaptable enough that I can obtain summaries within it. So here is the query function that we would use in order to obtain the overall percentage of uninsured people under the age of 19 who are in the lowest income category. The statement here involves a sum of column K, which is the people uninsured, the number of people uninsured, and then I need to divide that by column J, which is the total number of people in that demographic. I think I will pause here in the notes and go into Google Sheets and show you how to do a pivot table and also the query. So let's go ahead and open our data file in Google Sheets. Again, my goal is to obtain a total for number in group across all the counties, and also obtain a total for the uninsured across all of the counties. Once I have those two totals, then I can compute that simple ratio. To use the pivot table feature, we want to select all of the data here, and then I go under Data, and I select Pivot Table. When using a pivot table, I do not need to use a named range. I simply need to select all of the data as I've done here. The top part of this window will ask you what data do you want to use in your summary. That has already been determined because I pre-highlighted all of my data. The next is where would you like the output to be placed? I would encourage you to put this onto a new sheet so that we don't mess up our existing data table. Over here on the right is where I have my pivot table editor. We're going to be working with the values box here. And I want to work with the number in group. I want to obtain a summary for number in group. The default summary here, let's go ahead and blow that up a little bit so we can see that. The default summary here is a sum. So that is the number that we had earlier, that 20 million number here. You can change what you're using to summarize by using this drop-down menu here. We can do counts, for example, or we could do an average. For your task, I will ask you to do something with the average and also for a count. There are additional options under the Show As here. So we can show these values as percentages, for example. We can do that under that menu. This gets me the number, the total number of people in that demographic, and now I also need the total number that are uninsured in that demographic. So I'm going to add another value here, and I'm going to be selecting uninsured. I'm going to leave my summary measure as sum. Here are those two values that I had in the table initially. And now to compute the overall rate, I can just do that with a simple formula here, overall percent. I want to take this quantity and divide it by this quantity. And there is my 6.8%. If I want to change this to a percentage, I can do that under Format, Number, and then I would select percent here. That will convert that to a percentage for me. And now you can see that it matches that 6.82% that we described earlier. Okay, suppose next that I wanted to obtain this summary using the query function. Again, that query function is very powerful, and it's going to be, I would say, even more powerful than the pivot tables. When using the query function, I do need to name my range of data. So let's go ahead and do that. I will go ahead and just name it the small area health insurance estimates. Create an empty table. And then here I'm going to use the query function. So equal query. I want to specify the data to be used for the query. And then I need to specify my select statement. I'm going to say select, and then I want the sum of two quantities. I want the sum for uninsured, which is going to be column K. That's the uninsured. And then I want to divide that by the sum of column J. So here I am specifying K in the numerator and then column J in the denominator. Let me show you that query statement quick. So that's what that query statement looks like. So in my select, I'm able to actually do a formula or a ratio here. So I'm doing the sum of uninsured divided by the sum of the number of people. And the outcome from that query is that 6.82%. The name that it gives it here, okay, is automatically returned. And you can change that. Okay, you can change that name if you would like. So that's how you obtain a summary using a query statement. As I said earlier, we're able to add things like a group by statement or a pivot into this query statement, which makes this a very powerful way to summarize information. Okay, let's return then to the notes. The advanced level using Python. The actual script in Python is very, very short to obtain these summaries. If you'd like, you can watch that video. But here's the actual code to obtain that summary. Here I am just using the sum again. So this is the sum method. I'm doing this on the uninsured, and then I'm dividing that by the sum of number and group. So again, very similar to what we had in that query statement. I'm calling this the overall rate. So that entire summarization can be done with just one line of code. The summarize function is actually part of the dfply package, which is a very nice package to use when you are working with the data verbs and trying to work with and manage data. That Python code is here on my GitHub site for those of you that would like to try to run that. Again, that script is very short. Here's what I would like you to do for your task. For this task, I want you to use the Home Healthcare Agencies data. And this again is available in our data folder. It is there. First one is to just simply obtain the average star rating across all healthcare agencies. So instead of the sum, you're going to be using equal average to obtain that summary. I do not care how you obtain that summary. You could use formulas, you could use pivot tables, you can use the query statement. Does not matter to me. I just need you to obtain that average. Question number 2 is, what is the name and the location of the agency that had the highest rate for how often a patient needed to be submitted or admitted to the hospital? So here you're going to want to compute a summary measure for the maximum, because I'm asking for the highest rate here. You could also answer this using a filter action and selecting the largest value for the percent admitted into the hospital. Question 3 is a little bit more challenging, and that asks you how many healthcare agencies had a 100% regarding how often a patient was checked for depression. So there is a field in our data table for how often checked for depression. What you're going to have to do here is select a filter to obtain only those where they had a 100% rate for how often they checked depression. Once you have applied that filter, then you can do a count summary to obtain the number of agencies. Again, I don't care how you do that. If you do that with filters, formulas, pivot tables, it does not matter to me. And number 4 is to provide a description of the data processing steps that you use to answer question 3 here. Go ahead and submit your notes and then go back, check your answers to make sure that you are understanding the content covered in this module. Thank you, and that does it for Module 2, Part 3B, the summary data action. Thank you.